On today's Locked On Mavericks podcast, Mark Cuban might be getting in the way.
Hold on. Scott Foster's calling. We're doing a review. We're going to review the pod.
The last 90 seconds of this pod will take 30 minutes.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Hey, Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good! And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
This episode is brought to you by Spotify Green Room. Download the app and join us this week to get in on the action. Spotify Green Room, changing the way we talk sports. And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and coordinator for the Locked On Podcast Network. And joining me, as always, my co-host, contributor at Mavs.com. The leaking lord, the one more thing king. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
Draft lottery. Let's go. It's exciting. I love drafts. I love professional drafts. I watch too many picks of the NFL draft. I love every pick of the NBA draft. There's just something about drafts I love. Draft lottery. I went into last night saying I just want the majority of these picks to go to the East because top 5 draft, maybe a top 6 draft, depending on who you talk to. But if you want to count Scotty Barnes in that, but yes, let's go. Send Cade Cunningham to the Detroit Pistons. I'm excited. And I'm excited for Koo, host of the Locked On Pistons.
If you did not watch our Locked On NBA live draft lottery show, you missed out. Koo Cahill, host of Locked On Pistons, friend of the pod, been on the show. His reaction is just gold. Go to Locked On Network on Twitter and go watch the clip, or go to the Locked On NBA YouTube channel and go watch the clip of Koo just reacting to the Pistons getting number 1 pick. It was absolutely priceless. He starts doing like a victory speech, like he won an Oscar. Like he starts going through this whole.
I want to thank my fiance.
He starts going through this whole progression. It's genius. So go and follow Locked On Network on Twitter. There's too many people listening to this that have not followed Locked On Network on Twitter. Go follow it right now. All right, on today's show, Marc Stein dropped a newsletter with some Mavs nuggets in there. Not the Denver Nuggets, but some actual nuggets of wisdom, nuggets of some things happening. That's some leaks are happening, it seems like. And we're getting a look in the inside of the Mavs whole situation. We'll talk about that. There's some concerning things. There's some interesting things. Tim McMahon also reported, let's just start with this. The Mavericks will not seek any compensation from a team that hires Rick Carlisle, despite the coach resigning with 2 years remaining on his contract, sources told ESPN. Mark Cuban does not want to complicate Cuban's quest for a new opportunity. Who did I say? Cuban's request. Carlisle's request for a new opportunity. All right. There's so many different angles we can take this on. This was a talk that I think started with did Jeff Skin Wade bring this up? I think on the radio. That was a clip that was going around where he brought this up, where a coach just leaves, Rick Carlisle, with 2 years left on his deal, and I think Skin was the first one I heard to mention this. You just don't. It just doesn't. You can't just do that if you're a coach, right? Unless you have owner permission, which at this point it seems like he does. Cuban doesn't want to, complicate things, according to Tim McMahon and ESPN. He doesn't want to complicate things with Carlisle's leaving, trying to go to a new opportunity, trying to do right by the coach. Also, trying to do right by the head of the Coaches Association, which is kind of a weird thing because he probably has some influence on some of the other coaches. He's not an agent or anything like that, but at least he has definitely some sway and some authority or something in there. So this has happened in the past where Doc Rivers goes from the Celtics to the Clippers, and in return, didn't the Clippers got a first-round pick, or they got a pick, some kind of draft pick in exchange for Doc Rivers, basically, and traded. It's happened before in the past. There's no other examples that come to my mind, but this has happened before. But the Mavericks are not going to do this because they don't want to complicate things. It's interesting. It sounds like they're ready for Cuban or for Carlisle to go, or they just don't want to deal with the hassle of trying to figure out how to get the pick and who to get it from and all that.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a weird situation because I didn't expect them to get a pick, from the Rick situation, but then over the past, week, I've been like halfway convincing myself of, well, dang, maybe they're going to get something for him because he did have the 2 years left. And yeah, it didn't happen. So I like saw the tweet and I was like, well, that's a bummer, but I'm not like overly like pissed about it either. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like the twofold thing of, yeah, if he's going to walk away with 2 years left, then yeah, you say we want something for him. But then again, like I could see him, I think it's more of the honoring route of saying, hey, you won us our only championship in franchise history. You've been here 13 years. We know his whole, tenure in Dallas. Then if you want to walk away and go take a new job, then sure, like go do it. Like in a way, I viewed it as Dallas saying, you've earned this. Like you've earned to walk away and like, we're not going to complicate it, whatever. Whether you agree with that or not, that's up to you. But one thing I will push back on a little bit is I wouldn't be as worried about the whole, like, what other coaches around the league, what, like, I don't know what else. I mean, I guess there could be, what else could Rick Carlisle, I'll say this. I don't think a coach around the league would look at the situation if they said, no, we want to pick, and be like, well, don't want to go to Dallas because they're complicating it, wanting a pick in return. I think if they didn't want to go to Dallas, it'd be something around Bob Voulgaris instead of them wanting to pick from a team.
I just think it'd be another factor. There's something about a laundry list instead of just one. Like if there's one thing, it's Bob Voulgaris. Okay, that's one sticking point for a potential coach. And maybe you could talk yourself into it, like, maybe that won't be that bad. Or Bob Voulgaris is gone, and that's gone. Then, but all of a sudden, if it's okay, well, this thing with Bob Voulgaris, then all of a sudden they made it really complicated for Rick to leave and all this. And then what if it upsets Rick, and then all of a sudden Rick starts airing some dirty laundry, not to the public, but to other coaches? I just think it can complicate things in a certain way. And if it starts adding up, if it starts, instead of just being one sticking point, if it starts to become 3 or 4, then all of a sudden I think that could be bad for other coaches looking at the Dallas Mavericks. Now, shouldn't change what the job is, but there is probably a reputation at this point that Cuban may be difficult. He likes to get it. He likes to get in there. He likes to be involved. He likes to, have say. Obviously, he likes to have final say. He hired Bob Voulgaris. That's another thing where he's got his, Jerry Jones hand in the mix. And this is just it could be another example of coaches seeing, okay, now Cuban is trying to do this. Now he's trying to get compensation for this. So it could be another factor in that discussion or that train of thought for a new coach too. So there's a lot of different ways you can take it. My thought is, this is like you buy something from a store and there's a rebate where you have to mail it in. Remember when you had those rebates where you had to mail it in, like literally physically mail something to get the rebate, and you get the discount on it, and the person that owns the store. So you're like, well, I don't want to take money away from them, but for you personally, you could get a rebate. You just have to go through the hassle of actually going through it, and then a little bit of that embarrassment of, okay, well, I'm going to actually ask money back because I'm going to ask for money back, even though I know that person that owns the business, and yet I'm sending this in and all that, and go through the hassle of all that. I think it's more like that, where they don't want to deal with all that, go through all the drama of that, but you still save money. You'd still get something out of it. Why not fight for things that you could get in life, or fight for an asset? The Mavericks don't have a single pick in this upcoming draft. You know what would be nice? For them to have a pick in this draft that they could trade, that they could use. And so I guess I get trying to do right by Rick Carlisle, but I kind of don't. He's got 2 years left. It wasn't the Mavericks' choice for him to go, unless secretly it was, and they just decided to do the, well, I'm going to resign before you fire me thing. Like maybe it was that, but if it is the way that it is, if it is the way that it is presented, and that Rick Carlisle is just leaving on his own terms and own volition with 2 years left on his contract, I don't understand not going after some kind of asset if you could get one.
Yes. Yeah. I get that 100%. I think you're on to something a little bit with the, unless there's more to that, story of like how and why.
There always is.
Leaving. Yeah. But it is what it is. And now I don't think it would be a saving money type thing, because to my understanding,
No, I'm going to go back. I'm going to backtrack on you a little bit. It is what it might be. We don't know. It is not what it is. We don't really know what it is, right? Like it is what this is what it might be. So it could be.
Yes. But the saving money part, like him walking away from the contract, it's not like they're going to pay him for 2 more years right now. I mean, he's quitting. So like they're not going to have to like pay him. It's just, do you want to get compensation for him to go to another team?
So did Rick leave, or did they mutually agree to part ways? So that's the thing, right? It is what it might be. We don't know what it is. But coming up, let's get into some more about this. Marc Stein dropped a newsletter that has some interesting stuff about the Mavs GM/president of basketball operations search. Some insight into what Mark Cuban may be thinking. We'll get into that. But before we do, use the Spotify Green Room and talk sports with people. We'll be doing that this week. Join us. It's the perfect place to start or join a conversation. And now it's open to a lot of international listeners. I see a lot more different languages and all kinds of stuff joining. So if you want to join a room, go download the Spotify Green Room app. It's the same app that was Locker Room. The exact same thing. They just changed the branding, changed the name after Spotify acquired them. Download the app, available on iOS devices. Be sure to create a profile, link your Twitter account, join the NBA group or NFL or MLB or NHL or whatever you want to join. For the latest league updates, follow me. I'm at Nick Van Exit. And whenever I go live, I will notify you when we do. You'll get to the Locked On Mavs live room and all that kind of stuff. Can't wait to hear everybody's thoughts on the GM search, the coach search. I'm sure we're going to get all kinds of stuff on that. Spotify Green Room, changing the way we talk sports. All right, Isaac Harris, let's get into this Marc Stein newsletter. You can subscribe to it. It's New York Times. Marc Stein, one of the OGs of Dallas Mavericks media. He is one of the guys that we trust whenever Mavs news comes out, all that. Quote, I'm going to read this whole paragraph and we're going to dissect it line by line because it is quite interesting and juicy. The Mavericks are not pursuing established executives like Toronto's Masai Ujiri or Danny Ainge, the former Boston president of basketball operations, to replace Donnie Nelson, according to a person with knowledge of the team's intentions. The executives would surely want more autonomy than Cuban is willing to cede. As I reported last week, Dallas is strongly considering elevating one of Nowitzki's favorite former teammates, Michael Finley, to be the team's head of basketball operations. It would add to the group with an external hire, even if Finley gets the job. Cuban needs to surround him with as much versatility and experience as the Mavericks can muster, since he will always be the organization's lead shot caller and prefers to render the final say after consulting top aides. Oh boy. Lots in there. And there's a bunch of other stuff. That wasn't everything that Marc Stein wrote. There's more in there. But first of all, let's start with the Mavs are not pursuing established executives like Masai Ujiri or Danny Ainge. First of all, disappointed. I really thought Masai Ujiri, that whole situation in Toronto, I think that this also doesn't mean that he won't be. It just sounds like the Mavs are not going to pursue. Maybe Masai could pursue the Mavs, right? Like, this is, the wording on this is very specific and very interesting to me. If Masai does become a candidate, maybe he's the one that reached out to them. I don't know. It's just a really interesting thing. But the way this is all written, it sounds like they're honing in on Michael Finley being the replacement for Donnie Nelson.
Yeah, the Masai thing, is disappointing for a lot of people because, you kind of viewed that as the grand slam, right? It's like, This guy was, everyone regards him to the highest regards of, executives around the league, and he's a quote free agent on that. So, I think for a lot of people's perfect world is they hire someone like Masai and say, just run the kingdom. Like, you just
the alliteration, the M brothers, Masai and Mosley. That was the dream that I posted on Twitter the other day. I got like 150 responses of just people screaming for joy, like they got the number one pick, like Kuka Hill.
Yeah, but that's also one of those things where, as Mavs fans, like we know that Mark Cuban is going to be there. Like, Mark Cuban is going to be a part of the decision-making process. And that's why, like, ultimately, like, I've never really thought that like a Masai would ever come here, because Masai likes to be able to have his hands in everything, of like him making all the decisions. And from everything that we've seen in the past, from all the reports that we see right now about the Mavericks moving forward in the future, and even in Marc Stein's report in his newsletter, that Mark Cuban will always be the final say-so in a lot of these decisions. So that's going to limit you a little bit when it comes to bigger searches. But even more, this is what we've been saying too, of like, cool, I'm glad we brought in Dirk and everything, but we still don't know the status of Bob Valkaris. And it's like, no Masai type or Danny Ainge or whoever it is going to come in and take that job, whatever the job is, whatever the structure is. If Bob
we know what the job is.
Well, like, we don't know if it's going to be one person that's
Yeah.
like Donnie, or they're going to split the two and all of that stuff. So I never expected a big name to come here just in that role to not have like full power. So it's still a bummer though, because I think it would be awesome to get Masai and say, hey, go do your thing. Like, let's run the whole franchise and team. But that's just not going to happen in Dallas, because Cuban owns the team and Cuban's going to make those decisions. They're the final big ones.
And that's why at the top of the show I decided to say Cuban getting in the way. It's happening again, and it seems like I was okay. I think the Bob Voulgaris thing turned into something that it didn't need to be, but I think bringing somebody in like that was an interesting decision. It was maybe a creative way to try and add a new voice, but it didn't work. But this is just another example. Like, Mark Cuban is not Jerry Jones. He's not completely the guy that is in charge, right? And is the GM and like literally is in that role. He's not that. He's not Mike Brown with the Bengals. Like, he's not that. But he's essentially that at this point, right? It seems like there is a GM, and then there's a vice president of basketball operations in Michael Finley, and then there was Donnie Nelson, and then there was Bob Voulgaris, and then there was Cuban. Like, how many people can be heading up this department of making decisions like this? It's just it's infuriating to me.
And I would say I've seen some fans were like, we're pushing back on the Cuban side, saying, well, other owners across the league, they get called like when big trades happen. And that's true. Like, when big trades happen, a lot of these owners do get called and say, hey,
they all do.
Off on that?
They have to. It's part of the rules. That's why there's time after a trade gets agreed to that has to go to the league office. The owner has to sign off on it and all that stuff. Like, that has to happen for sure. But this is different than that.
It's different than that in the sense of, like, Cuban is more hands-on. He is sitting front row at games, and there is the give and take where it's like, I think it's awesome seeing him there at games and seeing how involved he is with the players and that he knows it, all that stuff. Yep. So the
stuff he did with the locker room, like improving all that stuff, the practice facilities, like he's done a lot of good stuff for this franchise.
And honestly, if I was in Cuban's shoes, would you not want to be a part of the decision?
100%. Yes, so, for sure.
I get all of it. It's just, it's kind of like when you're a Mavericks fan, you just got to accept, like, this is just how it is, because there's no changing that. He is the owner. So there's no changing, like, there's no firing of the owner if the fan base wanted it. Like, I mean, come on, this is what the Knicks have been in for years with with their, so like, and that's a whole different like ball game in that. So
So my question now becomes, why bring in a search committee if we're just going to go with Finley and Mosley? What's the point? What's the point of bringing Dirk back? What's the point of bringing in whoever else is part of the search committee? Maybe we're part of it. We still haven't gotten our new hire paperwork yet. But what's the point of doing all this if you're just going to go with the two internal hires?
Well, one, I'm still not fully convinced that, like, it's just going to be Finley and nobody else. Like,
even in this, it says, with an external hire, even if Finley gets the job. So that they're going to add to the group. They're going to do like they did in, who are some of the coaches we talked about before, like Ty Lue, where they add Kenny Atkinson and some other, like you have an inexperienced lead front guy, and then you have a bunch of other guys around it. Steve Nash with Mike D'Antoni, right? Like, there's just a bunch of examples of coaches like that. They're going to do that kind of thing with the GM, president of basketball operations position, where they'll get Finley, who's inexperienced as far as being the head guy, and then they'll get some other experienced guys around him. Like, that's okay. And it sounds like they're gonna do that, but I think I'd rather have somebody at the front that's been experienced, that's been around. Especially, this is the most important offseason the Mavericks have had, I don't know, in a long time.
Yeah, no. So that's why it's like, I've kind of went into this whole situation expecting Finley to get one of them. If I would be more surprised if they said, hey, Finn's going to be basketball ops and GM. I would be surprised if that's how it landed. And then they just promoted Mosley. I think he gets one of them, but then they bring in an outside guy to be the GM, an outside guy to be the basketball ops. But I think it's honestly bringing an outside person to be the GM. I think Finn will ultimately get that basketball ops position because he's been in that role, that secondary role, learning
vice
from
president
and like all of that for a while now. And I trust Finn with that. And I would be shocked if he's not a part of the front office moving forward. And I want him part of the front office moving forward. It's just, do I just want him I don't think I'm there. I would love to have an outside voice come into that situation and be, it's like if you just keep the same crew together, where's the outside voice? Let's bring in at least one outside voice, and maybe that could be the GM.
Hey, guess what?
What?
They just tried to do that with Reliably Bulgaris, right? Like they literally just tried to do that exact thing you just said, but he was not a guy with experience. It's a guy with an experience of a different sort.
Vegas.
Coming up, let's talk about. So one of the comments I've seen a lot on YouTube and Twitter and all that is, well, Finley and Mosley is one of the worst case, like realistic, probable scenarios because it'd just be two yes men for Cuban. Let's talk about that and dive into that and why that may not be the case and why it could be okay. I've kind of focused on the negative. Let's trend a little bit positive going into the third segment, and then we may talk a little bit of Suns Clippers. That was a wild game too. So let's get into that coming up. But before we do, got to talk about Built Bar. Built Bar is a protein bar. It tastes like a candy bar. They're delicious. I only have 3 coconut brownie chunk bars left. I ate one today. It was absolutely great. I had a couple meetings today and I was like, I just got to get through it. And so I did it with Built Bar. They're absolutely great. They're pretty good for you too. There's some new flavors too. I had to go to the website. I told you all the time, there's new flavors on this website. It's protein bar, tastes like a candy bar, strawberry, new flavor I hadn't seen yet. I had to go check it out. I bought a box immediately because some of these new flavors, they sell out so quick. Strawberry and orange. And I also topped off my 3-box box with mint brownie. That one's the staple. Gotta always have mint brownie. I'm getting them like once a month now. Like like I can see my order history and it's like, March 20th. It's like April 20th, May 20th, June 21st. Like it's just like every month on the 20th, I'm getting new Built Bars. And that's the biggest promotion I can give for this product is that I buy it literally every month. So go get you some Built Bars. Use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off at BuiltBar.com. Also want to tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline.ag is a place to put down some money. Wager, bet, gamble, whatever you want to call it. Put down some money on sports. They have all kinds of stuff that you can put money down. MLB games going every single night. Don't put money on the Reds. They will only make you cry. Put money on NHL series. Put money on the NBA. The Bucks. Minus 445 favorite over the Hawks. That's wow. Bigger than what the Clippers was in the first round against the Mavs. Remember how much we talked about that one. That one is really fascinating. If you think the Hawks can take them, go ahead and take that right now because it's going to change. The Bucks, game 1, 7.5-point favorite over the Hawks in the Eastern Conference Finals. That's wild to me. Use the promo code LOCKDOWN, get a 50% welcome bonus to your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook expert. All right, Isaac Harris, let's get into some more about this. So why would Mosley and Finley being, promoted, being introduced, being hired as the coach and head of basketball operations, head of player movement decision-making, right? Can we just call it that? Instead of having all these different decisions, but why do these two guys not be just straight up yes men for Cuban?
Well, it's been Donnie and Rick for years, and it's just
decades.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at Finn's been in this role, for the past 8 years. This is his 8th year as the vice president of basketball. So they're two completely different individuals. Like they're like we've talked about with Mosley, he's completely different than Rick Carlisle. Michael Finley, different person than Donnie Nelson. Like Finley's out here producing movies and stuff. Like go look at what Finn's been doing in the movie industry and all of that. It doesn't speak to like his GM basketball ops, resume and all of that.
Give me a minute, I'll make the connection. Give me a second.
But like you look at Finn, for instance, he got interviewed last year in 2020 for the Bulls GM position, and people forget about that. But he was considered there, like the Brunson stuff we've talked about with that. So we don't know how much involved Finn has been in some of these trades or acquisitions or any of these roster moves and stuff. So I mean, is there a sense for Cuban? Yeah. Is it easier for somebody like Finley, who's been in the system, who's been, in all these meetings with Cuban and stuff? There's that relationship already. Finley already, knows that Mark is going to have the last say so on all these things. Of course, that's 100%, because the moment you bring in somebody new to run all that, then you're reestablishing all these relationships, reestablishing all of these chain of commands of okay, well, you want to do that? Well, you need to call me first before you do that. Finn already knows all of that stuff. So in a way, I get it. like I can get that angle of what you're saying and asking, but I don't want to try to lump them into Donnie and Rick. And I like, if we're being real, Donnie wasn't just a yes man either, right? I mean, how many times have we seen where Donnie and them publicly, or stuff that's got out and stuff that hasn't got out, that to where they've like disagreed a lot on what they should do, drafting, free agent, different stuff. So yeah, I don't think they're a yes man at all.
Michael Finley does not owe his career to the Dallas Mavericks, right? Like
No.
he could have gotten that Bulls job. He was going to get, he got interviewed there. He was a professional player in this league. He's got, other things outside of the Mavericks. He does not owe the Dallas Mavericks his full career and all that. He has autonomy as a person. And I think there's a difference between a yes man and someone with institutional knowledge. Like if you have institutional knowledge, like you said, of how things work, who you go through, chain of command, all that. I think from sitting back, being the vice president of basketball operations for this long, sitting next to Cuban during games, we've seen him. He's been groomed for this role. We've talked about it and seen him in his rise and heard him talk in pressers and things like that. Like that's just not something that somebody does if they're not getting promoted to the groomed for this role, basically.
Exactly. And that's what I feel like it's sometimes with fans, it's like we just want to associate Michael Finley's name with, he's just the ex-Maverick who's just been like, it's just fun for him to be in the front office. That's a discredit to Finn. That's a discredit to him and his career now outside of his playing days. Like this dude's been a legitimate executive in the league for a while. So it's not just a trophy ex-Maverick player in the front office. Like, it's not Finn at all.
I'm not trying to besmirch anybody by this, but I will, just the way that I'm going to say this. This is not some guy with a player development position. This is not some guy just thrown into the broadcast booth, right? Like this is not somebody that just is like given a podcast to talk about things for the team, right? Like this isn't just somebody that's given a chance, like, hey, go ahead, do this. This is a guy that has earned a role, has come through, has worked. You don't get to be vice president of basketball operations with the Mavericks unless, for Donnie Nelson, who's been there 20 years, unless you earn a role, unless you get to that point, all that kind of stuff, right? Like I don't believe that. For all the, the negative things we said about Cuban and all that, I don't believe that he would just be a guy that would go in there and just be like beholden to Cuban. I think there's a chance he could be a guy that knows how to work with Cuban. He's been around for a while. I think you need that in a guy in this role. And Don Nelson was there before Mark Cuban, so maybe he probably learned along the way how to work with Cuban and how to. My dad always talks to me about this. And now that I'm like managing people in my social media role and all this, he talks about you got to manage down the people below you. You also got to manage up. You got to manage up the people that are above you. And
Got to lead down.
Mark Cuban might be a guy, loyal listener to the podcast. We know he's a guy that probably needs to be managed up every once in a while because he's a guy that comes in with a bunch of ideas and he's like, okay, let's do this, and then you have to figure out how to get Mark Cuban to think that things are his idea. All these kind of things that you probably have to do with a billionaire playboy philanthropist like Iron Man type owner, right? That you need to do. And so I think that institutional knowledge will be good for Finley or somebody in this role, whoever it ends up being. I also think the idea of adding an external hire with Finley, I think is positive. I think it's a good thing. I think adding somebody else, that they're at least looking at that. And I honestly think that's why this search committee was brought in, more so than just a Finley like figurehead role. It's all the other people around him. And we know from past experience that sometimes it's those extra guys, those other guys around the main person that actually matter. I'm just going to go through. The Los Angeles Lakers made some really good draft picks over the last 10 years or so. That was not like Jim Buss and Rob Pelinka and definitely not Magic Johnson. You know what I mean? It's a guy named Ryan West, who's Jerry West's son, that was in the front office, that was the one leading the scouting department and pushing all these guys. Some of these guys they got really late, the Zubatses, the Josh Harts, the guys they got late in the draft, the Jordan Clarksons, guys like that they picked up that they got late in the draft. There's a guy like that, and the Mavericks need guys like that in the front office to be able to evaluate talent, to get talent, to trade people, and all that kind of stuff. And I hope that they can get somebody like that in this process with these external hires, with Dirk and all them.
Yeah, and my question to the yes man thing about Finley, whoever they hire is going to be a yes man. It doesn't matter. Even if it's not Finn and they bring in somebody from the outside, it's going to be, Like they're going to have to say yes to Cuban. So if the mindset is we got to go get somebody who's not going to be a yes man to Cuban, he's going to do something. Well, guess what? That ain't happening.
Yeah, you're going to get a guy that's going to get fired in 6 months.
That just isn't going to happen. I mean, that's just not a realistic thing. So if now you're sitting there saying, okay, well, who's going to be the guy who is still going to listen to Cuban and still realizes that Cuban's going to make the final call on things? I would much rather have Finn in that role. You know, somebody who's been in this system, been around the organization, knows players and coaches and everything. If we're having to pick, you know, so that's the, I would love Michael Finley to be in this front office, especially with Dirk in that special advisor role and all of that stuff. Like that makes me feel good. I just don't want it to be just him. I want there to be some type of outside voice to where if we're sitting here a month from now saying, hey, here's Michael Finley, basketball ops. Here's this person as the GM. Here's, you know, Jamal Mosley as the head coach. I'm happy at that point. I'm saying, let's go. We're moving forward. Dirk's in the special, you know, advisor role and all of that. So I would be happy with that. Yeah.
What if it's Mosley with Terry Stotts as lead assistant, right? Like that would be a home run for sure.
Terry Stotts, JJ Barea on the end of, you know, some at the end of the bench type of an assistant.
Tyson Chandler's a strength coach. Sean Marion has player development. The other thing about this Marc Stein quote, and I know we're trying to read between the lines, like we're trying to, what's the word for studying the Bible and like going through it line by line, like word for word. Feels like we're doing this sometimes with these reports, but it's because they're dictated to people sometimes. That the Mavericks are not pursuing Masai or Danny Ainge to replace Nelson. I thought that was a real interesting part of it, to replace him. So maybe those guys don't become, like maybe Danny Ainge is like, I'm done being the top guy and I want to be like second to somebody. Never know.
I don't see a guy like Ainge
Never know.
or Masai or something like that.
Not Masai, but I think Danny Ainge might get to a point in his career where he's like, I'm tired of everybody blaming me for not trading for Anthony Davis when I had the chance. There you go. Let us know in the comments what you think about the Michael and Mosley front office coach pairing. Still got the alliteration there if you want to really stretch it. But let us know what you think in the comments. Tweet us at Locked On Mavs, at Nick Van Exit, at Isaac Harris. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.